Hello, everybody. Welcome to let's just say it's the third SG virtual event, our first event in May. And we're happy to welcome our panelists today. And first of all, thank you to our supporting partners, which are BPM for every postal deliveries, CMS Law, if you need IP or IPR assistance, Foxstrings for refreshments, and Mixwipe for enabling conferencing, and as well as also communication, and especially also our fireside chatters of today, which enabled us to try out this new format. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Peter and Gilles.
Hello. Hi, Steve.
Hello.
Hi. So it's a fireside chat, so we will be hard and quick, not quick and dirty. So first of all, Peter and Gilles, what are you doing actually?
I think I'm going to jump in on this point, maybe, Gilles, if you allow me. So, yeah, what we are doing actually for the moment, we are running many different things. So we are very active. So the thing is, we are running, of course, Sponsor My Event, which is one of the leading marketplaces actually for event sponsorship, mainly active today in America, in North America. But we're doing also a couple of other things. That means we're running Media 65, which is a local Luxembourg video production company, mainly specialized in event videos, conference films, and institutional films. But we're running also conference films, which is kind of a sub-brand of Media 65, which is, as the name says, is really specialized in conference films of all kinds, mainly for institutions, but also for private companies. And now, of course, thanks, I would even say, to this corona crisis, we have also added virtual events and hybrid events to our portfolio, which becomes more and more important, of course, now in these times, which are not easy, actually, for most of the companies in our sector.
Now is as well. We were adding a new organizer admin interface, which supports as well virtual events. So this is basically the way to go, virtual and hybrid events. I think that's something Peter will also talk about later on, and something which we are supporting in I would say a few weeks, that we will start with this new organizer back office.
But let's say so, both of you, I mean, I remember at the times when there was an ominous First Tuesday happening in Luxembourg. That was in the bod.com area and so on. There was Media 65, then it was Sponsor My Event, and I think there was one or the other venture. May I ask, how did you find each other to start your first venture? How did it all get off?
Oh, well, actually, indeed, Steve, as you said, there was the First Tuesday, and I remember the first Tuesday I attended was the first anniversary of the First Tuesday in Luxembourg, so it was something which was quite new, quite exciting. So I had not the slightest idea actually how to network at such a place. So I came there and just tried to make some connections, and I think it's a great occasion also to thank you, Steve, also for all the connections I have made over the years at the First Tuesday or other networking opportunities that you have organized. So that was something which was extremely valuable and helped me over the career. Indeed, at the beginning it was Media 65, so my company that I created in 2001. Then later on we created some more ventures. We created Yapoint, which was one of the first appointment systems. Then later on, indeed, Yapoint to be be sponsor my event now. How did we meet? Unfortunately, not over one of your networkings, this not, but Gilles started in 2006 actually as an internship in my first company in Media 65. So that was the first moment actually where I met him, and we saw, I think, quite quickly that there was kind of a match between us and that it would work business-wise very well. So we kept on working together. Gilles finished his studies then, made his thesis, etc., and left then even also for, I think, 6 months, was it, Gilles, to Australia, and even worked from Australia, worked also as a freelancer then from me. And I still remember actually he was sending me a picture where he was sitting on a magnificent beach with his laptop and doing some job for me. So that was fantastic. And then actually as soon as he was back, there was no time to leave or to lose, so he jumped really on board and became first a full-time member of Media 65. And then as we created this venture called Yapoint, he became the co-founder of it. Then Yapoint actually completely crashed after a certain time, and we just actually recollected what was left over of Yapoint. And Gilles and I, we decided that we would keep on going because we said we have a structure. We didn't make bankruptcy or so, luckily. And we decided we would want to go further and we would develop other things and use the structure. And so, yeah, and there we are, working both on Media 65 conference films, but mainly also on Sponsor My Events. So that's how it worked. And I think it was kind of a normal progress that Gilles became obviously the CTO, I became the CEO. So very good match. And there are a lot of good things to say actually in the relationship between us, because we are actually very complementary, I would say, and very different in certain places also.
And Gilles, very often it's said that if you go into the venture, it's like in the marriage. It's more marriage or it's more like co-living together?
I mean, I spend probably more time in the office with Peter than at home with my family when we are not sleeping. But yeah, it's kind of a relationship, yeah, where you need as well to not just give up on the first failure that you have, but you need to stick together and try to fix it and then go forward. I think that's quite important. Yeah.
And on the other hand, I mean, you had the first venture together, Media 65. It had, let's say, some business. It had a focus. It had product, service, customer. You had a target market, and so on. And what I witnessed is you pivoted quite often, and also in the right time, and apparently also in the right directions. But now a question to both of you. I mean, the first pivot, the first change in direction, when did you feel the need or the urge to do it?
Well, let's say like this. With Media 65 already, we developed different projects. So it was not that we were making complete new companies or complete ventures or so. So it was different things, but never that we made this big step of saying we're going to create now a complete new structure. It was then actually in 2010 where we were sitting together with our team back then in Media 65, who was composed of indeed 4 people, actually 5 people. And we thought, okay, what can we do? What can we do to break out of this kind of routine that we had with Media 65? Back then, Media 65 was heavily involved still also in web design and web programming, which was unfortunately for smaller web pages a fading market. So it was dying actually, and we needed to find alternatives. What could we do? And everybody was kind of excited of this idea of running a startup also and having the new structure and doing something. So we thought, what can we do? We looked around and we were actually searching for opportunities. The opportunities which, one of the opportunity which was showing back then, which came actually through real world example, was Yapoint. So making an appointment system where people can book their appointments with hairdressers or beauty salons and these things. Things which exist today also and which also luckily worked. Back then it was simply too early for it. Gilles, I think you can also tell a little bit more about the problems that we had back then.
Yeah, indeed. It was quite hard at that time because we went to hairdressers and beauty salons, and it was like, why would I need this? I have my clients which are coming in, um, and it's going to be too complicated. And at the time, we had the iPad was quite new on the market, maybe a year or something. So we said, okay, let's look. You can have an iPad. It's just easy. You click here, and it's done. And people, they were like, yeah, okay, but then I have to now acquire an expensive iPad. I have to have internet in my salon, which was at that time. Nowadays you have 4G, soon you have 5G, and at the time it was impossible to convince those people.
And from the technical point of view, were you piggybacking on the technical infrastructure you had already before, or you were most really taking a completely different avenue?
So before we were doing this, let's say that normal small homepages, and here we had to develop a new, complete web application. So which was something really completely different, and we did it at that time from scratch on. Nowadays I wouldn't do it like this anymore, but that's how you learn over the time. And we spent a lot of effort inside, and even due that we failed, I must say it was an immense learning curve, which I never regret doing this.
But on the other hand, now again, to both of you, is, I mean, the client base, the target market, let's say from Media 65 to YaPoint to sponsor my event, conference films, was there a link, or was it more opportunistic move?
There was absolutely no link. I mean, if you see, for example, from Media 65, our typical client group is more institutions, bigger corporations, or companies who are ambitious to produce videos, for example, or back then internet sites. YaPoint was more the clientele. It was hairdressers or beauty salons and all those who are working on an appointment basis. So kind of a complete different target group, which made it also difficult because I, especially as a kind of main business developer, of course, of the company, I was used to deal with bigger corporations or these institutions, but all of a sudden working with a complete different kind of client made it a little bit more difficult, I must say. The next pivot that we had actually when we moved over to sponsor my event, that was again completely different because first of all we worked on a real marketplace. Second, we had to work with sponsors, so companies who were absolutely not interested in any video or whatever, simply they wanted to sponsor events. And then on the other hand, of course, understanding event organizers and the whole world of sponsorship, which is a very, very interesting world also. So it was really kind of a pivot which was not linked from one to each other. The exception might be conference films, of course, where you are working again with a certain group of people, which is very similar to what we had already in Media 65. But the other two really completely different, which didn't make it easier, actually.
Mm-hmm. But then getting back a little bit more on the business side or the financial side, but also to both of you, is, I mean, the impetus for getting off, I mean, for starting Media 65 by itself, where what was it? What was driving you to start off Media 65, and Gilles, for you to join in and to go on with the story, with the journey?
Well, when I started actually Media 65 in 2001, that was not now something that I did out of the blue. I did it actually right after my studies, but I did it because I had worked already during my studies with many different companies. So I became I actually finished my studies in 2001. From 1999 on, I worked already as webmaster for Pimki Germany, which was back then the market leader for the prêt-à-porter féminin in Europe, actually. So I started working for them. them, and I took them over as a client. At the same time, also, it was a booming market for internet sites, and there were so many people who asked me if I could help them out actually making their internet site, etc. So for me, it was a normal step, which was almost seamless actually to move from my studies and finishing my studies over to creating my company and just continuing working on a full-time basis actually on what I did. Even though I had also the offer from Pimki, a very compelling offer, by the way, also to start working right away full-time for them. But as crazy as I always was, I wanted to do what I wanted to do, and that was Media 65, working with different clients, etc., which was much more interesting. So for Gilles, this was probably a little bit different, but Gilles...
Yeah. So I started then, when we started the Point, I think it was 2 years already at Media 65 as a full-time employee. And I must say it was always my desire to also create something for myself, which has a certain value, and not just like go somewhere and do a project for somebody else, so that somebody else can earn money with it, but do my own thing and create these values. So this was this thriving energy as well. And I mean, I come also from a home where my dad was an entrepreneur, so I was used to this, how the lifestyle is and how much effort you need to put in this. And still, that was something which was always my desire.
Get a little back to your journey. Were there some moments where you would said to yourself, or would have said to yourself, let's say, okay, oh gosh, and there should be an easier way, and then what made you go on?
Gilles, do you want to start with it? I think we could fill probably a whole day with experiences. But Gilles, go on for it, because I think you have a lot of things to say.
You have these moments, especially when your Point failed, which was our first failure. It was it was quite a tough time. But then at some point you see new opportunities. You start maybe developing a project, a little pilot project, and you see, okay, this is gaining some traction, and you have this little success moments which, let's say, keep you alive. And I mean, it's also now in this crisis, we have a certain business which fell away, and at some days you're sitting there and you're like, how are we going to make some money in the next month? How is it going to develop over the next months or years? But what always keeps me on top is I put it always in a relation. Like, how was I 5 years ago? In what situation? Is my situation, my personal, my professional situation, is it better or not? And I say, okay, I'm healthy now. I have kids. Okay, I have a healthy family. It's much better now. And I mean, still, if this doesn't work, you always need to put yourself in relation with other people in other parts of the world. And I mean, we are here in Luxembourg. We are in one of the richest countries in the world, and then there is no reason to complain, and you keep going. And on the other hand, I must say, as I said already, I like to do stuff on my own, and I don't want to have somebody who's like sitting on top of me and like forcing and putting pressure on me to finish stuff. So just for money, and so this is something which is always keeping me alive, and I think it's the same for all entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I can.
And Peter?
Well, I think overall there are much more moments actually where you curse your choice of saying I was independent. How many times did I go to bed in the evening and said, oh God, I'm going to quit. I'm going to do something else. I'm going to become, I don't know, I'm going to become a bus driver or whatever. something which is more easy, where I don't need to worry about anything, and then the next morning you get up and you say, come on, I'm going to do it, and then you have small successes which are going to build you up and which are going to motivate you, and where you say, no, I don't want to do anything else. And I must say, even though being an entrepreneur is definitely not a bed of roses, I mean, that's for sure, I wouldn't want to do anything else. I mean, it brings so many benefits and satisfaction also. Every single thing that we are doing is kind of our baby, and we are happy with it, so we're looking at it and we're just proud of our little achievements, even though sometimes these achievements might be tiny and completely neglectable, if you want so. But still, it's small things which are motivating you. And then at the same time, also now, especially with Sponsor My Event, we're in the special situation maybe that we started as a European Luxembourgish company and moved on quite quickly actually to the American market, which is something that most startups actually dream of. They want to have such a progress, and then all of a sudden you're sitting there and you arrange sponsorships with bigger conferences in Las Vegas or in New York all of a sudden, and you see, wow, these things are working. And me from my little Luxembourg here, I am working with big insurance companies in America, with big event organizers, and I'm making this happen. And that's something which is fantastic for me. Plus, of course, not only these success moments, but also the perspective. Even though we're definitely not yet millionaires with all what we're doing, but we cannot say now if this will not happen one day. So if everything goes well and we're going to make a brilliant exit one day with Sponsor My Event, then this will mean a lot for us, of course. If you have, of course, a normal job, then you know exactly how much you will have most likely at a certain age. If you're an entrepreneur, you never know these things, and we as a startup folks, actually, we definitely don't know it. So it's a certain uncertainty that we have, but even that can motivate you, and also the whole potential we have behind, where we know, okay, we can make it bigger. But also the past has shown us, even if you fall and you get a bloody nose, actually, you can start over and you can do something else. You just need to know exactly where is the bottom line. Where do I need to say now, okay, stop till here, but not further. From this moment on, it becomes dangerous. It becomes dangerous for myself. It becomes dangerous for my family, for my employees, etc. And there I'm in the same situation also with Gilles. I mean, he has kids at home. I have kids at home. We have a family. And that changes, of course, also your way of thinking. You're not thinking anymore as if you're 22, 23, 24, 25 maybe, where you say, okay, now I'm just going to do it and I don't care about anything. So you think differently. So you need to make money. You need to bring money home. There needs to be a certain stability. But all this is kind of a fascinating mix for me, which drives me being an entrepreneur.
And we now have a few questions from in the chat. So, and I mean, from the panelists, I will get them to you. One is these interpersonal cultural clashes amongst founders are the biggest reasons for startups to fail very early. The question is, how do you manage that, and especially in a crisis? It's a question to both of you, of course.
Gilles, do you want to start?
Well, I mean, Peter and I, we know each other now for 15 years, 14 years. So basically, we know what the other one is doing without talking to each other or seeing each other. So that's something which is really a big advantage. So I would say we are best friends as well on a private basis. So that's quite important. On the other hand, we have two different personalities which combine really well together. So Peter is more the guy who's going forward, who's saying like, yeah, we need to do it like this and this, and I'm more the, I wouldn't consider me as conservative, but in that relation, the more conservative part, who says, yeah, but you need to think about this and you need to think about that, and then we always meet in the middle. We find a consensus, and then we go for it.
Mm-hmm. So this means it's really your side?
Well, from my side, I totally would sign actually what Gilles was saying,
You
because
have to.
it's indeed it's a very big advantage also if you're really complementary. You don't have to be exactly the same, because that would be boring and would not help the company at all. But what is very important also is, just as in a relationship or a marriage, you need to learn over the years to respect the other one, and also to scale back also by yourself. I remember that at the beginning when we started working together, there were a lot of moments where I wanted eventually just to push my ideas through, and not acknowledging that I might be wrong actually with certain things. And I believe that over the years I have learned quite a lot also, simply to admit, okay, this was a mistake, it was not the greatest idea, to listen also to other people and to think really more, having this team spirit. And that's something that works incredibly well between Gilles and me, of course, but it has grown. It's maybe a little bit the same also as if you're playing in a rock band or in a music band in general, where Keith Richards probably knows exactly what Mick Jagger is thinking and the other way around. So they get on stage and they just start doing the thing. There is this chemistry between them both. If that doesn't work, actually, then indeed there's failure. So we have seen it also back then with Yapoint. Yapoint was composed of several shareholders, so we had, at the end of the day, way too many shareholders. And after a certain time, especially when the moments were not so promising anymore, where it became difficult, it showed very quickly also who was maybe made to be in a startup and who was not made to be in a startup. This is not now to say or to blame anyone, because not everybody is made for a startup. And if someone would ask me now if they would want to be in a startup or not, then I would say consider it 10, 20, 30, 50 times if you really want to do this, because it's heavy stuff. But it showed clearly back then simply that some of our shareholders, they were not made for it. And unfortunately also sometimes this can lead, in worst case also, to even lawsuits and friendships which are breaking. So that's why I would say, before you engage with someone creating a startup, really check for yourself very often if it's a partnership which might last, and try to find possibilities to work together before eventually, so that you get to know each other really. And then at the end of the day, key for me is always trust and respect, and also motivation, actually, so that you have a common goal which drives you both in the same direction. And on the other hand, arguments and fights you will have, just the same as in a family, just as the same as in a rock band, etc. I mean, it's part of the business also. But it's not that Jill and I were fighting now. That's not the case. We have discussions, but fruitful discussions, which usually lead to really some progress also.
Mm. But on the other hand, coming back now a little bit to the business side, I mean, a lot of people are in Luxembourg, when they start a company, they complain about the small market. And as I understood, I mean, you quickly went to outside market, international markets, and so on. Would you say that one should factor it in very early already in the venture, and then go for it? And also, if you go for it, is there some other requirements where you would say, oh, eventually take care on this side, on that side, either on the technical side, on the resources, financial, technical, and so on?
Well, let me jump in here. The first thing that I would say is you need to really evaluate what is the goal of your company and what is the target market of your company. We're in the situation now that we're running Media 65, which is clearly a more local company where we have our clients here in Luxembourg and where we deal with these clients, which is totally okay for a small company like this. On the other hand, with Sponsor My Event, we have a company which clearly couldn't survive only on the Luxembourg market. So it was clear right from the beginning that we would need Luxembourg eventually as kind of a test market to test our assumptions. But then it was clear actually that we had to move out of this market. I mean, just to give you some numbers, we Sponsor My Event, we have in the meanwhile way over 60,000 event organizers who have signed up. mainly from the American market, that's a potential that you would not find on the Luxembourg market. Absolutely not. It would be impossible to have this critical mass even here in Luxembourg, so that you can clearly say a company like Sponsor My Event couldn't function here in Luxembourg only. That's why I would recommend to each and every entrepreneur also, or startup person, to really evaluate where is your market, what kind of market is interesting for you, and how you can get on this market. So that's the first thing that I would say. And then also, especially not being afraid of leaving the market. We made the mistake, maybe with the Appoint back then, with the appointment platform, that we were sticking really with the Luxembourg market instead of maybe saying, let's try to go for a market which is maybe more open to certain new ideas. Because, well, this is now specific for Luxembourg. Luxembourg itself, as much as I love my country, Luxembourg is not necessarily a country of early adopters. That means if you come up with a radically new idea, then it's not very likely that people are going to adopt this idea very quickly. If you move on to the American market, for example, then you will find a lot of people who jump on this wagon and they say, okay, wow, that's a great idea. They jump off the wagon also very quickly as well. So this you need to deal also with. But overall, actually, the markets are very different, and you need to really see what kind of market is the right one. If you would like to have maybe some fintech or so, then Luxembourg, of course, is great because you have all the companies from the financial sector here in Luxembourg. London would be also brilliant, New York as well. But for this, Luxembourg is brilliant. If you want to do something maybe, like Sponsor My Event, then simply Luxembourg would not work. From a technical point of view, I think I'm heading over to Gilles because he has maybe some more ideas about this also.
Yeah, I mean, from technical, you probably need to see, okay, where do you store your data when you want to go international? I mean, now do you have, we store everything here in Luxembourg, Luxembourgish data center, but it's more a legal question at the end. Mm-hmm. What are you allowed to store in, and what are you allowed to take over the continent, overseas? But this depends heavily on your business. I mean, for fintech, we are now in the marketplace. That's quite easy still, but if you're dealing now with fintech technologies, you probably is something very completely different.
Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, sorry, go on.
No, it's fine.
Okay. On the other hand, coming a little bit back to your one of the actual businesses, Sponsor My Event. I mean, we will have also a workshop next week about this topic, about Sponsor My Event and organizing live conferences and so on. It is, how do you see the market for finding sponsorship? Let's say so now locally, because the question which has been asked is locally. For example, for a charity, for fundraising for a charity, do you see, how would you approach that market if somebody, for example, would like to run the project for a charity here in Luxembourg, organize an event or something like that, to do some fundraising? Do you have some feedback to give to this person?
Absolutely. I mean, it's my business, and it's of course also my task to coach event organizers and also of course charity event organizers to provide them information. It's, by the way, also something that we're going to launch very soon, so most likely in the next 1 or 2 weeks, with our Sponsor My Event Academy, which is going to become probably the biggest and most complete training class for how to find sponsors. But let's just give it in a nutshell, a quick overview also how you couldn't find your sponsors. So the first thing is, if you're running your charity event here in Luxembourg, you're organizing it, the first thing that you need to define is clearly who could be a potential sponsor. So that's the first thing that you need to see. Not every sponsor, not every company is interested actually in a charitable event. So that's the first thing. So really kind of make a list of all those sponsors who could apply, who could be suitable for the event. So that's the first thing that you would need to do. The second thing that you would need to do is you need to put together all the information. That means you need to create kind of a sponsorship pitch deck, so the potential sponsors can, at a glimpse of an eye, really, they could see see and understand what the event is about, and especially also what is in for them in the event, because that's something which is very important, so that the sponsor knows exactly, if I get involved, I will have this and this benefit, and I'm going to make also a solid return of investment also on my sponsorship. Then the next thing is you need to be able, as an event organizer, you need to be able to present, also to pitch your event to the sponsor. And that's very similar actually also to what startups have to do when they're pitching to investors. You need to kind of have your elevator pitch ready. You need to be able to get in front of the sponsor. You need to be able to defend it, to answer all the questions which are coming in. And then at the end of the day, you need to be able also to handle the whole follow-up after the negotiation, because that's something where I see that many event organizers are failing really. They have an interesting contact with the sponsor, and then they are failing handling the whole follow-up and losing the sponsor because of that. Because sponsors are not necessarily waiting for just your event, even though it might be very compelling. They have the choice to sponsor a lot of different events. So you need to really stand out of the crowd. And this is not only because of your event, but also the way that you're handling everything, which makes, in this case, a big difference. So that's something where I would say, in a nutshell, really what event organizers, charity organizers would need to make sure that they respect these basic rules and guidelines. And then it doesn't matter if the event is taking place in Germany, in Luxembourg, in England, or in America. The rules basically for sponsorship are almost everywhere the same, with a big difference. Here in Luxembourg, a lot of things are going through personal contacts, so it's probably a very good idea also to see, do I know someone who knows again someone else whom I could reach out to? So that's kind of more specific for Luxembourg.
Okay, so we are coming to the end. Just a small one for both of you. How would you see your next pivot, if there's anything? If, let's say, so you could dream, if you had a dream open, and you have now, let's say, 1 minute each of you for an eventual next pivot, or what it should achieve. Let's call it what it should achieve. Maybe you are not pivoting because you have this conference films, you have to sponsor my event, you have Media 65 and so on, which gets together more or less. How do you feel about it?
Gilles.
Hard question, because I didn't think now about pivoting right now. I mean, that's a bit what we are actually doing right now. We are in the process of a pivot. Well, we're not giving up a business, but right now, as we cannot go and film any conference because no conferences are happening right now, or we are focusing now on this virtual conferences. So that's something which we are doing right now. So I didn't think now about any other pivot. But for sure, there are also other possibilities, especially having some web tools that could be helpful for anybody. I'm currently working on it's just a little tool to do some slide sharing. So this is something which we need now for this virtual conferences. So couldn't find a nice solution for it, which is already available. So I said, okay, I need to develop something on my own. And this makes you dream. You have a little of success. Makes you dream. Oh, maybe some other people can use this too. But this is now something which is just a bit in the process, but which I don't know where it will lead at the end. But that could be one possibility, to have like a tool that a lot of people could use.
Okay, and Peter?
Well, from my side, I don't see now necessarily a big pivot. It's more kind of on 2 points where I would see a pivot, which I'm not speaking now about Media 65, because clearly pivoting to virtual or hybrid events is one thing. But for Sponsor My Event, there are two things. On one hand, logically, we need to adapt, and we are adapting also to arranging sponsorship for virtual events and hybrid events, where sponsorship activations might be different. So that's one thing which is clearly a pivot also, which is not such a big pivot for us, because arranging the sponsorships is more or less the same way. But the second pivot that I see clearly also for this year, but rather also for next year, is simply making the big step also and opening a physical and permanent presence also in America, being closer to our main clients. So that's something which we actually initially had planned already for later this year, but now thanks to this wonderful crisis, everything has to be postponed a little bit. But that's clearly the big pivot that I see for the moment for us, that we can take really a big step forward and move the needle in the right direction by simply having this physical presence. So these are the kind of two pivots that I would see. It's not necessarily now moving away completely from our direction and doing something completely different. It more kind of pivots inside our structure and our approach.
Okay, great. Thank you to both of them, both of you, and also to our attendees. And we are looking forward to your workshop next week, same day, same time. And also thank you for having enabled us to witness what the conference films is able to do. And that's for it. So we can see the bumper again, if it's possible or not.
We can.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve, for having us. So it was a pleasure, and indeed also it looks a little bit nicer when it's nicely branded and when you have transitions, so it makes a difference. And I hope that this will lure away some people of the typical standard Zoom webinars. It looks simply better, a little bit more professional. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.